Hi and welcome everybody to Cranfield University, the Grenville Turner Studios. My name is Alison Whaley. I'm the Director of Student Experience at Cranfield University, and it is my pleasure today to be the host for this very important webinar. So this webinar is all about the experience of our students, the voice of students across the kind of AUG Universities group. And it really is a chance for us to reflect on people's thoughts about the future and what that is looking about. So in terms of the future and the students we've got here today, this really special project, I have to just note, it is supported by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, and of course by the AUG Universities group also. Now, to be clear, we have some amazing students with us today. They do all study at the AUG Universities, universities within the AUG Universities group, but this is very much an opportunity for them to voice their own individual opinions. It's not the opinions of their institution, it's about them as individuals, about thinkers, about thinking about the future and what that means to them and what their concerns are. That really is the spirit of today's event, and I am very much looking forward to getting started on that. So how is it going to work today? So we've got a number of videos that have been pre-recorded. They have given our students an opportunity to talk about a broad range of really, really important topics, and we're really excited to share their views with you today. And then to really nicely support that, we've of course got our students live with us as well today. We're going to be talking, we're going to be answering key questions, and we'll be taking live questions from the audience as well. So please do note this is an interactive session. We do really want to hear from you as well, and we'll be asking the questions that really matter around the key topics that our students are discussing around some really, really important areas for our future. So that's kind of enough for me. We really want to hear from the students. That's what we're here for. So it's my absolute pleasure to firstly introduce two students that are in the studio with me today. I've got Ollie with me on the couch, and I've got Winifred in another area of the studios at Cranfield University. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Oliver Reed Vega, who is actually studying at Cranfield University. So Ollie, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, the course you're studying, and also what the panel has meant, being part of the panel has meant to you so far?
Well, Alison, first of all, it's lovely to be here.
Thank you.
For me, well, I grew up in the Canary Islands in Tenerife and spent 18 years there, and I moved to the UK for university. And I'm currently studying a master's in Cranfield University, Advanced Mechanical Engineering. And the panel's been great. It's been an opportunity to meet a lot of amazing people from different backgrounds, from all sorts of walks of life. And just getting the opportunity to sort of discuss key topics in life, and specifically within the ARC. So it's just been a great opportunity to sort of learn more about topics that I'd never really talked about before, but are really important in just, it's really key for everyone to have in mind. Yeah. So yeah, it's been great to just have the opportunity to converse and to explore other people's minds.
Sums it up perfectly. Thank you very much, Ollie, and thank you for being here today. It's great. And then also Winifred Saribe, who is in another part of our studios today. So hello, Winifred, welcome. If you could just do very much like Ollie did, just introduce yourself and then just tell us a little bit around what being part of this panel really means to you.
Great, thank you very much, Alison, for that. My name is Winifred Saribe, and I am a PhD student at the University of Bedfordshire in Luton. My area of expertise is in entrepreneurial finance, so that's what my research is all about, how entrepreneurs raise finance, mainly those at the early stage of their journey. A bit about myself. So my country of origin is Nigeria. I've been in the UK for some time now, and I've spent quite a lot of time studying. And one of the opportunities for me in doing the PhD was to sort of go into the field and learn more about what the real world is really like. Now, in terms of my experience on the student panel, it's been truly amazing. It's really been an opportunity to hear from people from other disciplines, seeing what they think about certain areas, also learning from key academics within the ARC. That has also been a very, very amazing experience. So yeah, thank you for the question, Alison.
Okay, thank you so much, Winifred. And then with no further ado, we do also have some students, of course, joining us remotely today, which I would love to introduce you to now. So we're going to start with Marilla Hart. So Marilla, over to you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Alison. Yes, I'm studying for an MSc in sustainability at Anglia Ruskin University.
Great, thank you ever so much, Marilla. And then we move on to Udoka Akonta.
Alison, my name is Udoka Okonta. I'm studying MSc Business Analytics at University of Northampton.
Great, thank you ever so much. And Henry Wimmer.
A very good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Just to echo my colleagues, I'm studying an MSc in Systems Thinking in Practice with the Open University.
Great, you can already see the array of people that we have with us today. And that moves me on to Samuel Dada.
Hello, everyone. My name is Samuel Dada, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Cambridge studying chemistry.
Thank you, Samuel. And Ayanda Malongo.
Hi everyone, my name is Ayanda Mhlongo and I am doing my PhD in multidisciplinary gender studies at the University of Cambridge.
Thank you so much. And Nicholas Chow.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicholas Chow. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago and I'm doing my PhD at the University of Oxford, focusing on climate systems and infrastructure management.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And Gurpreet Singh.
Hey everyone, my name is Gurpreet Singh. I'm from Buckinghamshire University. I am doing my PhD in sustainability and I'm redefining fashion sustainability. It's like sustainability by fashion, not fashion sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gurpreet. So as you can see, we have a great range of students. I'm really excited to hear more from them today. Just to do a little bit of scene setting before we move on to our first video, and then we'll be going on to our questions, of course. I just want to set the scene about what is the ARC Universities Group. Well, it's 9 universities between Oxford and Cambridge. And what's really good about it is working together to support sustainable growth in this area. And then why Cranfield? Why are we at Cranfield today? Well, actually, Cranfield is actually central in the geography of between Cambridge and Oxford. It's very involved in the ARC Universities Group. And of course, we are collaborative by nature. A lot of the things around sustainability and environment are absolutely critical to what Cranfield does. So it felt right for us to be here in the Grenville Turner Studios today, which we are so lucky to have at the university as well and get to experience this sort of broadcasting. So that's everything from me really, apart from what I would like to just let you know is the fact that we have got 5 key topics that we will be covering. We're going to start with community. Then we're going to be moving on to environment, then economy, connectivity, and then place. So these are the key topics the students have been asked to reflect on, to think about, and they've had some time to speak in a pre-recording around these topics as well. So we're very excited to now share that with you. So we're going to move on to our first recording around community. Thank you.
We as individuals, we begin to understand our role as every one of us playing a part in this earth being together. You know, you can't be racist to someone, you can't look down on someone because they are not you. My hope is that we all see ourselves as brothers and sisters and be able to march forward to achieve things together.
Looking back to the opportunities that my mom had when she was my age, she didn't have the opportunities that I have. My hope is that women will be occupying positions of influence and affluence.
All the divisions between countries are gone. All the divisions between societies are gone. People are just accepting of each other as we are. We acknowledge each other's strengths and weaknesses. We're open to conversation. We're open to discussion. We're open to accepting other people's views, to sitting around a table and just coming up with a solution to a problem.
How do we make these the funding available to people that have really good ideas to create great businesses, that would only make the UK a very, very innovative place to live and grow. And making sure that you encourage the venture capitalists, the banks, the grants, philanthropies to design tools that are a bit more inclusive and sort of reduce the wealth gap.
We will, I think, for a very long time be having discussions on affordability, social equity, social mobility, racism, sexism. We have to recognize that those things exist in ways that we don't even perceive, and we need to keep combating against them. There's no time when we will be done with that process. At least not in my lifetime, I don't think.
I feel like the growing age of social media and people being able to share things kind of at an instant, being able to share their thoughts on Twitter. Yes, I feel like it's quite important to ensure that the younger generations are kind of enlightened about the ongoings of science, because they're the future and essentially the world is pretty much theirs.
We need to preserve the heritage, but not to the extent where preserving the heritage stops us transforming and finding future solutions. But we definitely need justice for all.
If we are able to have this parameter of providing food, shelter, clothing, health and education free of cost to each and every human being, then there will be a system that will push common man to think above this. If we have a social life as human beings, that should be free of cost for everyone.
It's definitely going to require everyone to roll up their sleeves and be very intentional about ensuring that it comes to fruition. Or else we'll be asking the same question 30 years from now.
Okay, wow. So I think that was a great mix of some optimism, but some realism as well, which is really needed on these sorts of topics. So thank you to the student panel for that. And I have got a few questions to ask around this. So I'm going to come to you first, Marilla. In the video, you talked about the donut economic model. Can you tell us a little bit more about this way of thinking, please?
Certainly. So the donut economic model was invented by Kate Raworth, and it takes a much broader, more holistic view of what society and the world should aspire to, compared to traditional models that prioritize economic growth above all else. So it's called the donut economics model because it looks like a ring donut or a bagel. Unfortunately, I cannot share it with the audience, but I would encourage you all to do a quick search for donut economics, and you should come up with an image that is 3 concentric green circles with some red shapes on the outside and the inside. So the inside border of the donut is our social foundation, and the outside border is the ecological ceiling. We need humanity collectively to stay within the dough of the donut itself. Social foundation broadly aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We want everyone on the planet to have a standard of living above the social foundation. So, for example, access to water, food, health, gender equality, and so on. There are 11 of these metrics. But at the same time, we need to keep the planet below the ecological ceiling. If we overshoot the ecological ceiling, we go into the danger zone. And there are 9 planetary boundaries as defined by Johan Rostron from the Stockholm Resilience Centre and his colleagues. And in fact, they recently made a documentary with Sir David Attenborough about the importance of keeping below these planetary boundaries. So the donut economics model wants us to stay in the middle, everyone to have a decent standard of life without exploiting the planet and basically tipping planetary life support systems into disequilibrium, which causes us grave danger. Now, unfortunately, as a world, we have already crossed 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries. That includes climate change, biodiversity loss, land conversion, and nitrogen and phosphorus loading, which is caused through fertilizers and pesticides. And as the UK, we've actually crossed most of the planetary boundaries. The world, unfortunately, still has people living below all of the social foundations, so they're in the middle of the donut where they shouldn't be. And even in the UK, there are people living below the social foundation, especially with regards to equality and employment. The model, though, does give us a way to prioritise and work towards thriving in balance. The goal is to meet the needs of all the world's people within the means of the living planet. And the donut provides a framework to address such imbalances, regenerate our environment, and create a more equitable, just, and inclusive society. It is actually being used around the world by governments at all levels, by civil society groups, and by businesses. One of many inspirational examples is the city of Amsterdam, which has declared a new vision to be a thriving, inclusive, regenerative city for all citizens, whilst respecting planetary boundaries. Some UK regions have also taken up the donut, and they include Cambridge within the Arc, as well as Birmingham, Devon, Glasgow, Liverpool, London, and Preston. Some sub-regions, such as Ladywell in Birmingham, as well as countries like Costa Rica. Donut economics model can be embedded within our governance structures. It can include and should include different governance structures, for example, citizens' assemblies. And I advocate that if we value a habitable planet, thriving in life and equity of opportunity, I would advocate donut economics as a framework to be embedded at all levels within the Arc.
Wow, okay, thank you so much, Marilla. That's fascinating. I will certainly be Googling that model later, but that's so insightful, and thank you so much for sharing that. And now I'd like to move over to Nicholas, because I think there were some really interesting comments there made, and I'd be interested to understand about how we provide the right infrastructure and support in order for communities to thrive.
Yeah, Alison, thank you for that question. It's a really, really interesting one. I think it's interesting because our communities are so different. They're so individually variable, and across them, there's so many different kinds of infrastructure that we can be discussing about providing. Healthcare, education, housing, water, energy systems, our roads and our waste systems. And so for each of these communities, there's going to be a different amount of right or different kinds of right to sort of suit the individual needs. But I think despite that variability, there are some things that we can focus on. And really, when I'm thinking about imagining the future 50 years from now and how we think about providing infrastructure for our communities, I think I sort of hold two core concepts at the center of my thinking. And I think the first is really planning for the future. And a lot of people have probably heard about this before, thought about this, planning for climate change being the first one. Thinking that when we're building new roads or new pipes or new dams, these kinds of assets, they will be in place for the next 20, 50, 100 years. And so we have to think about the physical limitations. They have to be ready and able to handle the physical limitations or the expected climate changes coming across those 20, 50, or 100 years. And so being able to plan for those is really important. But in addition to those, I also tend to think about planning for future policy and regulatory scenarios. If in 5 or 10 years' time, the standards for our water systems change, we can't decide that we don't have a water treatment plant to provide that service. We're going to have to build a new one, and we can't afford to keep doing that every 10 years. So instead, what we need to be doing in our planning is right now thinking about how is the climate going to change in the next 100 years, but also how are our policies and regulations going to change across the next 100 years. And I think many planners have those things close to the front of their mind. The second thing I really hold core is about how do we provide that service. So our infrastructure systems, we think about how they're built and what they can provide, but how do we provide it to our customers? How do we ensure that our customers are getting the services that they're promised? And in particular, how are they provided equitably? We cannot continue to have our infrastructure systems provide inequitable service where the wealthy areas or the wealthy people receive the benefits or most of the benefits of these systems. We have to think about equity in in our service provision, in particular, ensuring that everyone receives sort of safe, clean, accessible, and affordable infrastructure services. So really for me, holding those two core approaches or two core concepts, that is planning for future scenarios and planning for equity, holding those two at the forefront of our planning, I think will give us a lot of the right things, right infrastructure services we need for our communities to thrive. Once they have those things, those communities can really begin to focus less on those core needs and more focus on how their communities will begin to move forward.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicholas. So I think what's fascinating about that actually is so many of us think about just planning 5 years ahead, but what Nicholas is saying there is we should actually need to be planning 100 years ahead in some of these things. And I think also what's coming through is this interlink between the subjects that we are discussing today, because we can already see some creep onto some of the other areas because they are so tightly interlinked. And that leads us on really nicely to our next topic, which is to share with you first a video around talking about the environment, what that means to our student panel when they look ahead to the future. So if we could just take a moment and we'll all look at that.
Have we taken the time to actually hear the voices behind the statistics?
The greatest threat or the greatest risk to our future security is actually not having a coherent, truthful, factually applied approach to dealing with climate change.
Depending on what we do within the next 8 years or so, future predictions could be quite different. But unfortunately, we already have got an element of climate change locked in, and life is already getting a lot harder and will continue to get a lot harder for millions of people around the world.
Nature is being sacrificed for unsustainable development, particularly, and for the expansion of some industries.
If you're encouraging people to use solar energy, solar panels, it's also important that the process in making those solar panels become also sustainable.
I work in a lab, for example. We use quite a lot of single-use plastics. We need to do more in those certain industries because this is kind of like a repetitive problem that we have to improve our usage of, single-use plastic or develop, new technologies that we can use to, improve health in general and understanding in science, but also consider the environment as something quite important to take care of.
Some of these decisions that we make on infrastructure, in particular things like water infrastructure and dams, they last for hundreds of years. And so we have to make a decision, maybe now, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, that is relevant for the next 100 years.
We need to hold power to account and say we've got a real climate and ecological emergency on our hands, and we cannot continue with business as usual.
People should relearn how to live green and how to live as nature has made us, instead of relying on technology always.
People that are struggling to feed themselves, I don't really think that they're really bothered about not using plastic or things like that, no.
There needs to be a partnership amongst all of humanity and not just an agenda that is promoted by a particular group.
Whilst individuals can make a difference, actually it's system change that we really need.
Right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I loved a number of things throughout that. We cannot continue with business as usual pretty much sums up the feelings of everyone, I think, in that video. So that brings me on to a few questions, and actually Ollie in the studio. Hi, I'd really like to know a little bit more about, what can be gained from making the environment a priority?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Alison. And actually, sorry about that. The environment is where we live. It's where we've lived for the past millions of years. And it's where we'll live again for the next millions of years. It's where we wake up, it's where we have breakfast, where we go to work. Environment is all around us. And I think a key to the issues that we're having today is the fact that it's been taken for granted. If you look back to the years where we started as a civilization, we lived in a forest, we depended on the forest, we depended on the environment. Then through the Industrial Revolution, we started to get these innovative solutions, and slowly we saw a decline in the importance of what we've given importance to as the environment is. to a point where now environment, for me, as I see it, is only used as green spaces, particularly in cities. And with that decline, I personally have noted a decline in happiness overall in society. You know, when I'm in Cranfield, for example, it is an area where there's quite a lot of industry, but at the same time, it is quite green and quite natural, and I can hear the birds chirp in the morning. But then I go to London, and all I see is people sort of, slouching the tube. I don't hear the birds, I hear cars. So I think that humanity would gain a lot in it's not only mentally, but if I'd first like to elaborate mentally, just in creating a happier place, a place where it's full of green, a place where people appreciate what's around them, because I think that's what's been lost here. And if you gave the environment more of a priority, I think that the whole planet would have that sole mission to make it a better place, to make where you live a better place, because that's where we're going to be forever, is in our environment. And I think that sense of coming together to work towards making the environment a better place for all of us would really bring up the spirits and really make the community even more tighter, which is something I fear would not happen if we didn't give the environment the priority it needs. And then additionally, from an ecological point of view, the biodiversity and the sort of ecology is so important for our planet. It's what provides stability, climatologically speaking, and just generally speaking, really. And that's why the environmental challenge right now is so crucial, and sort of giving the environment and what surrounds us that priority right now is so crucial for what will be the environment in the future. Furthermore, if we don't make the environment a priority, unfortunately, a lot of communities around the world will unfortunately suffer, as they still fully depend on the environment. So I think if we stop being so sort of selfish and just worrying about our lives and make what's around us important again, that will not only benefit us in sort of spiritual and all sorts of ways, but it'll benefit the entire planet as a whole.
Wow. Okay, thank you so much, Ollie. You put that so well. So thank you for that. Can I just remind the audience that if you do want to put any questions about anything that we're discussing, please do that in the chat, and obviously I can keep an eye on that from the studio here as well, so we can make sure we're asking questions from the audience as they come through. Okay, so I do want to move on actually to speak to Gurpreet now. So what's the biggest priority for you in terms of the environment?
The biggest priority for the environment has always been balance, and it will be the priority always. Like my colleague said, Ollie said that we started with the forest, and we were depending upon the forest when we started as human species. We think we still depend upon forests. We are talking about donut and circular economy. And the next step for the donut and circular economy, once we understood it, we will go ahead in another decade and we will start working on web-like economy. We need to develop some patterns that will be driven by the nature. And this whole force of creating biodiversity in a sustainable manner will be guided by the faculties like biomimicry, biodegradability, and biocompatibility. There has to be an intellectual encounter of high technology and high spirituality. We already know what the forces and what the basis of high technology is on the planet, and what we as human beings has understood technology is. But when we talk about spirituality, or in other words, because spirituality, when we say, it becomes a highly loaded words and you have your own interpretation to understand that word, I would like to say it will be high consciousness, which simply includes caring and sharing for others. And when we talk about the fusion of high technology and high consciousness, we will have a design which will be a integrated design, and which will focus on designing out pollution, designing out waste, and designing in for the longevity of the matter or the material which is there. See, we as a human being, we only have created two things, and we only create two things. One is our thoughts. That makes us different from other species on the planet. And the other is the waste. Human beings are the only beings which creates a material called waste, which never dies. So that brings us to an economy which designs products for death. So we have to highly rely upon nature, how the nature has been existing since billions of years. What is its existential power? And we need to have this systemic view of all the systems on the earth. And we need to develop that approach of science that can help us to run circular economies in a web-like structures. So when we say a circular economy, it's simple. It is not like a water cycle that it evaporates and it condenses and comes down, and then there's rain and it again evaporates. It's not like that. When we use a textile or a fabric, if we convert it into a garment, then we convert it into the waste. Now we need to convert it into further more. If we can just eradicate it and we can trash it and make new spinning methods and new textile chemistry methods and make new fabrics, that can be a circular economy, but it can be also used for some other things. We call this upcycling instead of recycling. So we have to repurpose, we have to reshape, and we have to rethink what the conventional mind we have for the society. So this is what my point of view is. There will be a fusion of circular and web-like structure which will be guided by the nature. We have to somewhere fuse the natural existence power with the technological and scientific logics that we have as human beings. And the idea will be flourishness. It has to consider all the species. We as human beings, being most capable species, cannot be the most mean species. We have to care for other people also. We have to care for other species also. It is not limited to understand this concept is made for us. Nature is not for us. Nature is with us. We are the part of the nature. If last human being is not there on the planet, still the nature will be there. So we need to integrate that and we need to learn it from the nature till we do not discover a new science of making new nature. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Gurpreet. I love what you're saying there, especially about how we are with nature. And that's really, really powerful stuff. Thank you. And Henry, some thoughts from you as well in terms of what are your thoughts around what our priorities are in relation to the environment?
Thank you. Yeah, understood. I really believe that the best action in support of combating negative climate change comes from a sense of ownership. So the two things I want to share as briefly as possible is, number one, I want to zoom in, if you will, to the Oxford-Cambridgeshire Arc. So imagine that region of the UK. I would like to see these climate change facts humanised first and foremost. When I say humanised, I mean make them relevant at a tactical, granular level. Wonderful facts out there, so much incredible scientific study that exists. But I think there's real strength, power, and opportunity by making things relevant to individuals, to households, to streets, to towns, etc. When I say that, I mean, what does it mean for my future food prices? What does it mean for the cost of my house, or perhaps house insurance, if it's going to be affected by, for example, floodplains, and so on and so forth? I want to reference something Nicholas said when he talked about looking 100 years in the future. And I firmly believe that there should be more structured analytical techniques employed to conduct scenario generation. So whereby experts create, in conjunction, plausible future scenarios that look at, let's say, 1, 5, 10, 50 years in the future and suggest what the future could look like. They are then agreed and made tangible and real and granular for the people that live in, let's say, the Oxfordshire-Cambridgeshire Arc. This is how your world will plausibly look if climate change activities continue unabated. So again, make it real, make it personal. Again, the best change comes from that sense of ownership. Very briefly, if I may, though, I think what's Marilla mentioned this as well. One of the biggest issues we face as in the world is basically truth decay and the diminishing role of facts. So two phrases that are used more and more. And what concerns me greatly is that you might have the best scientific data in the world about the negative effects of climate change, but it's very, very easy to undermine that. And therefore, as an individual living in the Oxford-Cambridgeshire Arc, it's very easy for me, if I was so inclined, to dispel or to throw away, to chuck away the advice about how the future may look, because somebody's undermined it. The point is here, those that govern, some particular individuals around the world that have been in positions of leadership and governance, can actually manipulate facts. So my point is this: who assures the people that make decisions? Who governs the governors, if you will? So two things there: humanize climate change, make it real on a granular level. And number two, how to make sure that we actually have those facts and those facts are upheld. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, Henry. So that's great. We've actually got a question that's come through. Well, actually, it's a really good quote. Actually, it's "These bright minds collectively will promote and implement positive reforms for a better world." So how lovely is that? I think that sums it up. Sums it up beautifully, to be honest. And what a lot of core, really key topics, but so eloquently said and put. And I think that's really reassuring that these are the voices of the future. And with all of these thoughts, I really do feel kind of in good hands in that sense. So that's us kind of done on the environment. I think that's really given us all of some food for thought. Now we're going to move on to economy, which again, we've already touched on in different ways throughout the topics we've already discussed, but we're going to really focus on economy now. So I'm going to share the video with you.
What will create difference in coming future will be technology on one part that will create work opportunities.
You know, the technology innovation is what's quite unpredictable at the moment, you know, because you never really know what breakthrough is going to take place till there is a breakthrough.
How can we build a future where we don't need to generate as much energy?
Work from home is here to stay.
I think we'll probably be at a place in 30 years where we can have a virtual conference where we feel like we're in a room with someone.
How do you get entrepreneurs very early on to embed sustainability into their product or service design?
I think, you know, we can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. One alternative model of economics which should be considered is called the donut economics model, where you look at the minimum level of positive development that you want for everybody without also putting too much pressure on our planet and planetary boundaries.
Crypto, blockchain, these are things that will change the banking space. We've seen a lot of companies begin to accept some of these.
The biggest change I anticipate seeing is actually cryptocurrency being regulated.
The major problem in society right now that we're going to have in the future will be antibiotic resistance.
Again, such a wide range of things for us to think about. So we do have a number of questions on this that I want to make sure we get through. And I'm going to start with Winifred, who's in the studio. So Winifred, thinking about the blog that you wrote around how to attract investors to the ARC, in that you focused on the importance of economic mobility. So could you just tell us a little bit more? How do we encourage this? And also, how do we ensure banks and funders get on board with it?
Great. Thank you very much for that question, Alison. Now, for those that have been able to read my blog, one of the key things I highlighted there was the ARC is made up of several counties and their parishes. And in the ARC, as with any other place in the world, you'd have some areas that are more affluent than the others. So if we look at the ARC region, we would highlight places like Oxford and Cambridge and some other places. Now, when you think about it, for an investor that is coming into the ARC, some of the attractive places would be these cities I've mentioned. But the problem is when you go into those areas, you already can see some level of congestion. And congestion in the sense of the number of people living there, the cars and all this, it's already putting a lot of pressure on those environments. Now, when you think about this and you sort of approach it from an economic mobility perspective, one of the things there is, rather than all the congestion that you see in those areas, and when you see all this congestion, it also means that cost of living would be much more higher there than other parts of the ARC. One of the things that can be done is, now we see that, like Udoka has said in the video, remote work is here to stay. We can leverage on the technology and the the ease that that provides. People can work remotely, so we don't all need to be congested in those areas. And it also means that as investors come into these areas, they're most likely to want to set up shops or invest in places that are a bit more cheaper in terms of setup costs. So let's say rentals in other parts of the arc where it's much more cheaper to set up, rather than, you know, everyone converging in these more affluent parts of the arc where there's already too much stress on the environment. Now, so that's really one of the things we can think about. But also, if we look at this from a household perspective as well, when people move to other parts of the arc that are less expensive, one of the things you also see is that there's more disposable household spending. There's more disposable income affordable to them. They're able to use this extra cash to fund greener ways of living. So, for example, switch to cleaner forms of energy, or sort of incorporate habits that can encourage more sustainable ways of living. Now, by doing this, it's also making it easy for them to live their lives. It also means that these bright minds that would be attracted to some of this sort of highly affluent parts of the arc, they're able to still work in those areas, but they're not necessarily burdened by some of the economic issues that they might have faced if they were living there. They can still work there, but they can still live in other parts of the arc. And what that also means is, the economic resources is a way of sort of spreading things around. So, for example, I stay in Luton. It means that some of these people can be absorbed into these kinds of, into places like Luton or Bedford, and then they're still able to contribute to those local economies where they live in. And so that's one of the key things I think is very important. That way, that's how economic mobility can be a way to solving some of the climate crisis that we're currently facing. So I'll stop there and pass it over to Alison to continue with the questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Winifred, for that. And I think being able to write blogs and things like that these days is such a good way to share thoughts. So that's great. Thank you for expanding on that. So Marilla, I'm going to come over to Marilla now and just ask around actually something, you wrote, Marilla, as well, around the need for adaptation to the challenges of climate and environmental changes in your blog as well. Could you just tell us a little bit more about adaptation and also why it should be prioritised in your view?
Absolutely, Alison, thank you. So just to be clear, I do also wholeheartedly promote mitigation of further greenhouse gas emissions and mitigation of ecological destruction. And I advocate for the urgent regeneration of our biodiversity, habitats, soils and more. I do strongly make the case for adaptation because regardless of what we do going forward, even if we were to reach net zero tomorrow, which obviously we're not because we're not set up to do that, sadly, there is still an element of climate change locked in. We are already experiencing climate change, and the only question is not when, but how bad will it get? So a local example is Cambridge City Council, which predicts that the three most likely effects of climate change on the city will be increases in floods, increases in water shortages and droughts, and increases in summer temperatures. And the likely impacts will include decreases in health and well-being, damage to built and green infrastructure, and increased demand and cost for public services. Obviously, how well we adapt to the changes upon us will play a huge role in how well we cope and our standard of living going forward. Though we must realise that adaptation is not only a question of preparing to respond to the odd shock, such as the odd flood before life goes back to normal, because we will be living in a different reality where unpredictable weather is the new normal. We also need to start building the infrastructure now to cope with a different climate and to a more depleted environment, and adapting to a world where we need to live more likely on the planet going forward. We need to adapt to requiring less resources in order to live well and thrive, and to use resources more efficiently. And we need to prioritize a new food and agricultural infrastructure that is more seasonal and local, make sure that we can actually feed ourselves going forward. And as Nicholas said, he put it very, very well. We need a long-term vision for our infrastructure, looking centuries ahead. Nicholas also spoke about equity. I mean, we're lucky in this country to be able to afford to adapt. It's always the poor who feel the impact of climate and ecological devastation the worst. And I believe we need legislation and governance to make sure that this equity and long-term vision comes to fruition, and that there are targets for developments to be efficiently adapted. We should start with the worst case scenario predictions on the bell curve of ecological stress for the Arc and ask ourselves how we can adapt to live well in this region in the future. How should we justly transform our society? And that includes our infrastructure, but it also includes our norms and values and expectations. So, for example, with housing developments, how do we build them to be net zero and adapted to extremes of temperature? And for example, built or retrofitted to passive house standard. Passive house standard is very common on the continent already. It allows people to live at a comfortable living temperature all year round with minimum needs to use energy to heat or cool their homes. And other things to consider would include being efficient with use of other resources, such as water. So considering things like rainwater harvesting, consider things like energy production through solar panels and local food production. And I believe it isn't all about the latest technology, although that does have a part to play, because adaptation, it might, for example, involve the most modern solar panels, but also taking the best from how we used to live. So making room for local allotments and community orchards, and building houses that have larders and cold stores so that we don't need to use electricity to power huge energy guzzling American fridge freezers. It's very important, like I said, that we think about how we are going to feed ourselves, and that is not something I've heard or read enough discussion about. As a sustainability student, I really think that has been overlooked from what I've heard in the literature around the Arc. And just think that in the future, we will have different norms and values. Different things will be acceptable or not acceptable. So, for example, a water-stressed area where we're already overloading our planet with too much nitrogen and phosphorus pollution, the idea of watering and fertilizing monoculture lawns might actually, hopefully, will be seen as a complete heresy, when we could be regenerating wildflower meadows actually require very little input and do a lot more for biodiversity, and where we will need water for actually our trees and our crops. Things like compost toilets as well may be seen as a common and a logical way to reduce water usage, reduce waste and water pollution, and to fertilize our fruit trees and our orchards and our flowers. So a very different future that we need to adapt to, and we need a transformative vision that is not linear from today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilla. Appreciate that. Okay, so this is a really hot topic. So we do have a couple more questions to go through. So I just want to come over to Samuel, really, because Samuel, you've mentioned a little bit about pharma and life sciences sector. What does that need to do, that specific sector, in your view? And you've also talked a little bit about single-use plastic. So I'd quite like to know your views around that as well, if possible.
Yeah, I think one of the problems facing the pharma and kind of life science sector is the kind of lack of communication and collaboration between obviously both sectors in terms of academic sector and industrial sector. I think society has built this industry to be very competitive. A lot of people get into this industry, like myself, because we're interested in healthcare, we're interested in improving the health of people. We want, lifespan to increase as well as, health span. However, things have been changing, obviously because of society and economy in general. We've been able to see, due to the pandemic, the beauty in when, industrial partners, like, for example, I can give an example like AstraZeneca and, Oxford, coming together from kind of different sectors within the same area, coming together to develop a vaccine in such a very short period of time. And I think this is a testament to the capabilities in what, science can do and industry can do. However, we're not utilizing this, this kind of resources that we have to kind of put our brains together and communicate and come up with, ideas to eradicate things like, cancer or even, neurodegenerative diseases. Because when we think about communication within the sector, we see, scientists communicate with each other, but they don't actually understand each other. And I think that's a general problem that we have, because if we as scientists that we understand what we're doing and we don't actually communicate effectively with each other to understand, okay, this is what I need and this is what we're trying to do to kind of, for example, cure cancer or, antibiotic resistance, for example, how is the person on the street, or someone from a different sector going to understand what we're trying to do or achieve in order to invest in, the purpose? So we have a lot of work to do to improve communication for one, and also collaborate with each other rather than competing with each other. I think that's something that needs to improve in general. And this also stems to the environment aspect of it, where, in my lab, for example, we have the freezer at -80 degrees, but we can increase it to -70 degrees and reduce energy consumption by at least 30 to 40%. So this kind of ideas and knowledge needs to be passed around between, our industry in general, from, the industrial sector to the academic setting as well. And we just need to come together and collaborate more effectively with each other.
Okay, thank you so much. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so we are getting tight on time on this section, but I do really want to still come to Ayanda because there's some cool things that you mentioned as well. So if I can just come to you, Ayanda, briefly in terms of leadership and diversity in the future, if we can just think about that. So in your view, how do we ensure fairness of opportunities, and actually what does that mean in practice?
Thank you so much for your question, Alison. When you pose that question, the word intersectionality comes to mind, right? So when we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about this concept that recognizes that people's lives are often shaped by many factors, many characteristics, positionalities such as race, class, gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, geographical location. For example, a Black woman can experience discrimination for being a woman and for being Black and for coming from perhaps a working class background and. So the ands results in intersecting oppressions and exclusions that can be generational. So acknowledging and constantly doing something about such complexities and not necessarily ignoring such realities is very important when developing and shaping policies, frameworks, initiatives, when teaching, when hiring people, when leading organizations. So an intersectional lens is important in addressing the isms. Your racism, your classism, your sexism, your ageism, and other intersecting forms of discrimination which operate to exclude or privilege some groups over others and produce or reproduce unequal outcomes and unfair experiences. Now, the hope is that this will help bring about representation, having different kinds of people occupying positions of influence and affluence, creating equity and justice, so that in the future, it doesn't take me so long to think about, for example, 5 CEOs who are differently abled. So this is why I think intersectionality is a crucial and plays a crucial role in having to bring about the transformation that you highlighted in your question.
Okay, thank you so much. That's great. What an excellent point to leave this topic on and move on to our next one. So we're going to move now on to connectivity and infrastructure. And we've got, again, a short video to share with you, and then we'll be coming back to some questions.
Social media could be, in one way, a positive thing. However, in the way that it's going right now, where people are trying to absorb information at quite a quick pace, I'm not sure if that's quite productive in the long term.
Learning is online, working is online, socializing is online. And to me, those represent like the fundamental areas of human life. There's no need to get an air ticket. There's no need to get a visa. There's no need to get all these this sort of blockages to collaboration.
The space that private transport takes up is horrendous. The future will be based on higher speed trains. I think there should be more lines everywhere connecting more cities, intertwined, underground, overground.
We're feeling like we can't sit down for like 10 minutes to watch a whole video. We have to have this in like 1 minute and get the whole full information.
How do we go from the systems that we have right now, these legacy systems that have been built 50 or 100 years ago, or even 10 years ago, and they still have 30 or 40 years on their lifespan, but they're not what we would consider green. We can't just rip out what we have to live with it.
The biggest change in society in the next 30 years is actually a continuation of that which has been happening for the last 30 years. And the thing that really matters to me is information. So the prevalence of information, the ability to create it. Anybody, you don't have to be an expert content creator or producer to actually have an opinion.
I think it really does make it easier for people that would not have had the opportunity to collaborate with people from other parts of the world to do it. So I think it does open a door.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, everyone on the student panel. Your contributions were very thought-provoking as ever. Now, I do have a number of questions here, but I am also conscious of time, so I'm going to ask my student panelists to be quite nice and focused in their responses on this one, so we can just basically hear from as many of you as possible. And we are starting to get some audience questions in as well, which I really want to get to. So if I can start actually with you, Ollie, on this one. You're interested in the future of travel and transport. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, listen, I think the travel and transport is a really interesting subject, because there's always talks about climate change and how transport and sort of how we get around is one of the key contributors to climate change. And I think personally that transport finds itself in such a thrilling moment where we've got a foundation that's driven us to climate change, and now we need to somehow build on that to drive us out of it again. We're not the only contributor, of course, but we are one of the main ones. So I think that there is such an exciting opportunity for transport to make something new. Because, for instance, I like to look at transport as it was, which was purely coal-based and purely, with fossil fuel-based. It sort of reached that top to the ceiling where we couldn't really develop it further. Yet now we're sort of sidestepping to electrifying the grid, to electrifying vehicles, to electrifying transport, to greening the transport, to making it net zero. And I think that's such a fantastic opportunity for it to build even further and reach for new limits. And I even dare to say that what if we could make it further than net zero and make it net negative? What if we could find a way through research, through intense, well-funded research, to develop new technologies and innovations which could actually build and sort of walk back through our own steps and sort of get rid of some of the greenhouse gases that we've unfortunately as society put up there in the first place. So firstly, I'd like to say that innovation is unpredictable and we don't really know what will happen. But what I do think should happen, and probably will, through the correct sort of guidance and funding and research, is we'll find a way to travel around faster, easier, better, without having that massive carbon footprint that we already have today. And I just think that the opportunity is too big to ignore. And I'm really thrilled and really excited to see what will come out of it on the other side.
Okay, thank you so much, Ollie. That's great. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to move over to Gurpreet now. And Gurpreet, I'd like to know, you're away from home studying in the UK at the moment. How do you foresee communications with your family and friends in the future? How do you see that working out?
When you're away from your house and you want to speak to your family, that is something to do with your mental well-being and mental resilience. First of all, in future, I see that there should be no need for people to travel across overseas to have their education. It should be available in all the places. Second thing, when I talk about the development of communication among people and community, see, we started from the agricultural age, we jumped into industrial age, and then we jumped into information age. Now we are into information come conceptual age. Further, I imagine that in communication world, we will be going to the conscious age. We are talking about artificial intelligence, and we are talking about virtual reality. We will be working on the sense of touch, the thirst of being comfortable, and the thirst of increasing your controllability will be there. I would like to see my family, which I can do now also. I would like to hear my family, which I can hear now also. But then I would like to feel and touch them. I want to empathize with them. I want to control the appliances of my house when I am sitting in UK. So I imagine a lot of robotics. I imagine a lot of development in haptic science. And then I somewhere feel that the world will be so much homogeneous. The way of life will be so much homogeneous. Like I have a digital identity of Facebook. My son will be having that, but my grandfather doesn't have that. So that understanding of each other will not only be through video calls and virtual reality, but there will be some other applications. I will be having an app in my phone which will be constantly telling me the health and the heartbeat of my parents. So that is the way of communication which I see, because the only idea is to feel more resilient mentally when you're away from your house, and you need to be more comfortable. You need to feel more empathized and sympathize, and you need to have that remedy of homesickness. So if science can work on that, and if science can make me feel like home, like I imagine a hotel, like each hotel says, we will feel you like you are at home. So that will be on the telephone itself.
Okay, thank you so much, Gurpreet. Really interesting to, from your own personal experience as well. You're kind of studying away from home and have a good feel for that, but very good points. Thank you. And I'm going to move on now to Udoka. And I'd just like to know what your view is in terms of what does the future world of work look like? What do working patterns and working from home look like in the future, in your view?
Thank you, Alison. I've thought about it in different ways. You see from the video, work patterns are changing. You can't hold it back. If you look at 10 years ago, 15 years ago, how many of us had WhatsApp? How many of us had were doing Zoom calls or having meetings online this way? But it's changed. Now a lot of people want to do, I want to work remote. Some people want to work few days from the office. Some people want to work part-time. They don't want to work full-time, and it's more of a skill-based economy where we are all in. And if you really want that skill, you have some people that would say, can I work partly from home? Can I have some days from home? Can I work fully from home and still giving my best? At the end of the day, what we have to look at is just KPIs. As long as we're able to meet the KPIs, once in a while we could meet together in the office and say, let's just have a recap of what has happened so far. It's something that wouldn't happen so immediately. Yes, I know in the last 2-3 years we've had to push towards this because of the pandemic. Now we are going beyond that, and some people will surely get back to the office. But it's good to see that the future, if we could test it within that pandemic period and see that, it really worked. We now have to start thinking, what can we do beyond this? I'm sure we're looking more on cyber security, having to ensure that if our workers are working from home, they can work and get the job done rightly without losing data. I know data is data of clients is a big issue. Without losing proprietary information, you know. So we can't do without it. There must be a compromise somewhere along the line going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Okay, so really interesting points again, and it moves us really nicely onto our final core topic, which is around place. So again, we're going to share a short video with you now.
If we are going to be, for example, building new developments, we need to think about how can they be carbon neutral, how can they be adapted not just to the odd risk or shock, but to all the changes that are coming in the long term.
Because of reducing resources, because of growing population, we have to share and care.
I hope that communities at that time will be more integrated with things like the environment, that will have more walkable cities or places to live that have access to things like education, healthcare, food, ecosystems, fairly close by.
I think there will be mistakes made on our move to sort of planning and what the actual future will be.
I'd like to see a greater partnership between those people that have got the responsibility of planning, but also those people that are affected by it, and working together.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that as well. So that's our final core topic around place. So I've just got a couple of questions again. Again, if you're in the audience, please do feed questions through. But I'm going to come to Nicholas first. So Nicholas, what I'd really like to ask you around is, what are the factors that contribute to creating a good or great place to live?
Thank you for the question, Alison. I think I can answer this question in so many different ways. But at first, I'll put my student hat on and say that as a student, I think I look for places that are affordable to live, that are walkable, that make me feel welcome as a student. They are spaces that are accessible to me. I think that that's really important at an individual level. But I think that there's also a bigger question that you're asking here that we're getting at, which is, what makes a place not just good for individuals to live, but also a community that is good for, or good as part of the environment? And I think that question is much more interesting. I think there are a lot of factors behind that, in particular at a community or a development level, and then again at a regional level. At a community level, I can think of a good community being a place that's good to live, having a lot of factors of resilience and sustainability. Things like, what kind of energy systems do we use? Are we using green energy? And if we are using green energy, is it green energy only in name? Is it green energy that's produced really far away that we pay for the service of using the name for? Or are we producing our energy locally? That's really valuable for resilience in the cases of energy grid shutdowns. We can have microgrids that make our communities more resilient in themselves. What are systems or communities doing around their waste management? Do we have a sustainable waste management system or plan when we build and develop these new communities? As we're building the communities, we also have questions around sustainability for the building materials. A lot of the materials we've used in the past are not as sustainable as we might want them to be, but can we influence existing policies, building construction policies that would allow us to have a more sustainable community? And with that, sort of beneficially impact, or at least mitigate or minimize the negative impacts to the environment that we might see. Similarly, as we develop communities that we want to be good places to live, we also have to think about the impact of our communities or developments on the region, on the areas nearby. So I think about when we're developing systems or developing communities that might have negative impacts in terms of water quality. We all share water. Those upstream of us use the water before us, and by de facto, we recycle that water and use it again. So are we really understanding, or how do we build good communities that can provide or ensure that we don't pollute those systems sort of in the long run? So I guess from my perspective, to sort of wrap it up, I think that a good place to live, or places to live that have good attributes, would certainly be places that are integrated, that have systems that are adaptive, that are adapted and well informed by the communities around them already.
Great, thank you, Nicholas. And I actually wouldn't mind just holding on right just there one moment, because we do have a question from the audience that I feel might be quite fitting for you you might have a view on. So sorry to jump in, but
Sure.
Just around data and evidence, I just wondered what your view of this idea around having a data observatory would be. Do you have any particular views around that?
Yes, I absolutely do. I've worked in several contexts where there are many different infrastructure sectors, and in particular, many different community level actors, stakeholders, local politicians. They want to make decisions, but they don't have access to the data that they need to make decisions. And so I really strongly advocate for decision making with data. But I see one of the challenges for that is that many actors might end up using different consultants to who themselves use different data. And so we have many different actors who are making decisions about environmental planning or climate change planning, but they're all using different data. I think one way to solve that major problem is by having a centralized data repository. It does require us at a government level to take responsibility for that data collection, that data cleaning. But I think it is going to be so crucial to have good data in a unified location so that everyone can make decisions using the same data so that we have better integrated systems.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to the member of the audience who submitted that question. Thank you, Nicholas, for that. Okay, so I am now going to move to Henry. So Henry, I'd just like your views about, it's around connection ultimately. So how do we create greater connection between those planning future places and then those who actually will live in them at the end of the day?
I understand. I'm going to caveat this by saying I don't honestly know what the level of disconnect is at a kind of local or national level, so I don't want to criticise when I'm ill-informed. I'll say this though, that for me, whether it's planning, whether it's policy, or whether it's behaviour change, this all needs to be done with and not just done to those audiences that will be affected by it. And therefore that's built on empathy. And what I hope is happening, or could happen more, is actually those people that have the privilege of being in a position of being a planning body actually work with those local communities. And Nicholas just mentioned community very importantly. But imagine empowering those communities and giving them some of the skill sets to understand what planning will actually, what it actually could look like in their area. Not only are you upskilling people, but those planners are also getting on the ground knowledge, if you will. So planners working with local communities and saying, look, these are the tools we've got. This is what we hope to achieve in terms of, for example, new houses, roads, or railways. But working with you, local community, with your local knowledge, we co-own, we collaborate, and therefore we connect even better.
Great. Thank you ever so much. Some really good thoughts there, Henry. And I like your caveat at the beginning. It's always good to have one of those. Okay, thank you so much. So that does actually bring us to the end of some of the conversations around the core topics. If you are in the audience and still have any questions you'd like to ask, please do so. But I'm going to come to Winifred and Samuel first. What I've got now is a couple of questions, just much more broadly for the student panel, just to get some closing remarks and thoughts from the panel today. So Winifred and Samuel, I'm going to come to Winifred first, who's in the studio today. What were the best bits for you about this experience?
Thank you for the question, Alison. Now, in terms of my experience and some of the things I really enjoyed was the interdisciplinary approach, so getting people from the sciences, from finance, from sustainability, from, infrastructure, all sort of disciplines to share their own ideas. I think with these kinds of things, you really begin to see things from other people's perspective that you would not have considered if you were looking at it just from your own perspective. So that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed. Secondly is the whole process, the structure, the filming and all these other things that we got to experience that we normally not have experienced in the ordinary course of our studies. I think that was really, really helpful to get that kind of exposure and opportunity at this point in time. but also it's also the learnings from, because we had several workshops and a mini conference, and from there, some of the key things that we learned on, sustainability. And it was really good to hear from some of the key experts in those areas and really understand some of the reasoning behind the research that is out there. I think that was really, really helpful as well. So I think I'll stop there and allow Samuel to carry on.
Okay, thank you so much, Winifred. So going to come straight to you then, Samuel, on the same thing. What's been great about this experience for you, or what have you enjoyed the most?
Yeah, I can only just highlight what Winifred has said, basically. For me, it's been kind of the interdisciplinary approach, getting people from different communities, different spaces, different universities, and people working on different things, completely different things, coming together in one space and just kind of having a discussion about, things that are going to be affecting us in the future, and just talking about how we envision our future to be like later on. But yeah, I think it's very good just having a greater perspective of how other people see things, because sometimes when you're working in a specific sector or even in education, it's so easy to be so close-minded to things that are affecting you and your environment and your surroundings that you forget what's actually happening, or how people perceive things, or how people see things from a different, in a different way from other perspective or other industries. So that's been very good, and it's been quite a learning and eye-opening experience for me personally.
Great, thank you. And I know in my role as Director of Student Experience, one of the key things our students are always saying is, I want to work more with students from different areas. I want to speak to them. I want to get that opportunity. And, we're trying to do that at a university level, but actually with this, we've been able to do that at a kind of much, much larger scale, which I think is really coming through in your comments. So that's really great to hear from a professional point of view, from my personal experience as well. So I'm going to come to Udoka now, because I'd really like to know from your view, Udoka, where would you actually like this to go? What would you like to see come from this?
Well, something I really I've seen us work as on a bigger scale. I see us working on a bigger scale beyond here. This particular meeting helped us to bring a lot of minds together. As we say, system thinking. We had looked at systems of systems, and now beyond this, I believe there will be points where we will need to collaborate together. We will need to partner together to get things done. I see beyond here. I see us doing a lot of things together. It's not just for this. It's not just for this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's it, isn't it? This is kind of just part of it. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Okay.
Yeah, I see that collaboration is very key.
Yeah. Okay, and we've been talking a lot about the future today, and we've been talking a lot about the collective future, and it's really good sometimes also to think about the individual future. So Ayanda, I'd love to ask you on a personal level, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Thank you so much for that brilliant question. I definitely consider myself as a carpenter of human spirits. And I think that my colleagues are also doing a stellar job at being advocates for change. So when it comes to the future, I definitely see myself living the highest and truest expression of myself as it relates to global governance. I definitely see myself working for United Nations Women and serving my country, South Africa, at an executive level, definitely as from an advisory perspective, and also as the next and maybe potentially the first female president of South Africa.
Wow, I love that. Great. Thank you so much, Ayanda. That's amazing. So inspirational. Okay, so I do really want to get the whole panel involved now, just to have an opportunity to get really focused on some final thoughts. So I'm going to come around the panel and just really ask about what would you like to see the government do? And I really am looking for a sentence from you all so that we can make sure. I know it's really difficult. I know you could probably all talk for quite a while on that one, but I really would love to understand, what would you like to see the government do as a priority? If we were talking about this, what would you like to wake up tomorrow morning and we know the government's done about this? Keep this really focused. So I'm going to come to you first, Ollie, because you're next to me on the couch. What would you like to see the government do?
I want to see the government come to the people. I want to see the government sort of step down from their higher step, if you want to call it that, and sort of just humanize us and the environment and our future, and sort of say, what do you want to see? What do you want to wake up to, as you said, tomorrow morning and feel like you've done? I want the government to come to us for us to actually have a real direct input into what we'll see in our futures, because right now we're in such a critical point in humanity where the future is dangling on a wire that I think people want to make a change, and the best way to do that is by actually approaching the people directly and letting them drive the change.
Great. We've got leverage on that, haven't we? Absolutely. Okay, so then coming over to you, Winifred, if you could just sum up what you would like to see the government do, if they could do something different tomorrow.
Okay, thanks for the question, Alison. Now, one of the things I would say is sort of more effort towards integrating awareness about, things like climate change, about what the future is going to be like if we don't start making some changes to the way we live, more into the educational system. Because first of all, if we're going to think about making some progress on these issues, there needs to be a culture change. And one of the best ways to change culture is through education. So the more we embed some of these key issues into the educational system and begin to teach it very early on, so that the future generations begin to understand the implications of living in a different manner very early on, I think that's really going to sort of help us really begin to make progress towards achieving the kind of future we want as we go.
Okay,
so
thank you.
There.
Thanks so much, Winifred. And I'm going to move us straight to Marilla. Could you give us a sentence or two on your thoughts?
Okay, so during the COVID emergency, the government actually acted like it was an emergency and took emergency measures. Now we're in a climate and ecological emergency, and we need the government to tell the full truth about this and act like it's emergency and a just transition to climate and ecological justice, and with adaptation, mitigation and regeneration. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It's a really good point to make in terms of, we have seen the government in action. Udoka, your thoughts? Okay,
I believe the government should take it as priority. Once you see something as priority, you set timelines and workable timelines, so that whatever the discussions are being taken, it's public, and we can take decisions quickly. In that way, everyone sees that, the government is really hands-on. They really want this to work. I know there will always be political impasses, but there will always be a point. Once the government keeps showing that they are ready to work, everyone will always be on board. Yeah.
Thank you. And Henry, I'd love to know your thoughts, just summed up, please.
Understood. So regarding action against climate change, I would like to see the ARC being focused on and power being devolved down to individual counties devolving power down to cities, towns and villages, and basically those individual communities deciding what actions they're going to take within UK parameters to counter climate change. The important point is here, if they succeed in those approved targets, they get reduction on things like council tax, etc. But the point is, let them work it out, and then that will blossom and grow and inspire other parts of the UK.
Great, thank you so much. Samuel, your thoughts?
I think the government should just listen to the environment and to society in general, and also think about more of long-term implications of the actions that are being taken today, rather than short-term kind of gratification, essentially.
Great. Government should listen. Good. Well summed up there. And Ayanda.
I would like to see governments prioritize diverse intergenerational leadership, because intergenerational leadership is about meaningful engagement between leaders of different generations. So different worldviews help create greater diversity and fosters innovation. I truly believe it's for young leaders like us to make transformative contributions that are not only going to be in entry-level positions, but also in middle, senior, and executive positions.
Yeah, it's great to see we're already starting to see some changes in the leaders across the world, aren't we? And in terms of the ages of those and things, which is really promising. Okay, Nicholas, your thoughts, please.
Thank you. I would love to see the government act now. I think we cannot wait for ideal information. We can't wait for perfect information. We are in a climate crisis at the moment. We need to have transition plans for where we are now and moving into where we want to be in 50 years.
Great. Thank you very much, Nicholas. And Gurpreet.
What I think we should be focused on sustainability, and government should work on community development projects based on the innovation that is a fusion of art, authenticity, and technology to create flourishment of human beings and other life on the planet, and to redefine the social reality of human beings.
Great.
Which is more responsible.
Thank you so much. That's really good. I mean, I think that's great. There's so much in common with what you've just said in terms of, the actual pace that we need to be acting on, the fact that we just need to be listening to each other, acting, and also in some ways, giving different people ownership of the decisions that are being made and the actions that can follow those. So thank you so much for providing in such, again, eloquence, your thoughts on that key topic. So I am just going to move us along now, because we've kind of gone through all the key areas. I do want to actually say some thank yous though to people. I'm going to have to read from my card quite a lot on this one, because I do not want to get anyone's names wrong or miss anyone out at all, because there's so much that goes into making something like this happen, especially the experience, like Winifred touched on, around how much has gone into this. This is more than just a webinar today. This has been an absolute collection of activities to bring these minds together, have really good conversations, learn from each other, and really interact in the way that we want to anyway at universities, but then be able to do that across the ARC Universities group has been a tremendous thing to be part of. So if I can just say some thank yous to people that have been working tirelessly behind the scenes. Thank you so much to Stanton Media, Paul, Nick and Jim, who did all the recordings for us and have helped in so many different ways. Chloe Head at Cranfield, we've got Kerry Evans as well in communications, and also Alistair Lomax, have all been really working hard to bring this all together and make it a reality. The studio that we're in at Cranfield and all the staff here that's making today possible, and the makeup artists and set design students that actually Buckingham New University got involved in the recording aspect with Stanton Media, which is great that we got students involved in that side of things. The Environment Partnerships Board, of course, Professor Simon Pollard, OBE, for his leadership of the Environment Partnership Board. And the Environment Partnership Board actually helped us find these wonderful students that you've heard from today, which is really, really important. Adele Maher and Nick Palentzas, who were great advocates from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. As I said at the beginning, they are supporting this project. So a great thank you to them. And of course, the students. Thank you so much for the time that you've given, the thought that you've given. Just today in itself, you've given so much, but given so much to this from the very start. I remember seeing your tapes in terms of your recordings, showing your interest in being part of this amazing project, and the energy that I saw in those has definitely come through throughout the entire project, and it's been a pleasure to work on it with you all as well. So in terms of wrapping up, next steps, the recording and all of the videos that you've seen here today will be made available. Of course, there'll be coverage on social media. Look out for stuff on LinkedIn. Please do share what we've discussed today, and also ask us any further questions. We are very much, this is kind of the start of a conversation, not the end of one. So thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. Thank you again to the students. Thank you, Ollie, for sharing the couch with me. And take care and have a lovely rest of your afternoon.